Thank you. The next item of business is consideration of business motion 19044 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Bureau, setting out a revision to today's business and tomorrow's business. Can I call on Graham Day to move this motion?
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And no member wishes to speak against the motion. The question, therefore, is that motion 19044 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. Thank you. We'll turn now to topical questions. Our first question today is from Maurice Golden.
Presiding Officer, I refer members to my register of interests to ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure that it meets its new target for banning biodegradable municipal waste going to landfill.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
There will be a centrally coordinated intervention to help remaining local authorities procure solutions for the remaining tonnage of waste. Scottish landfill tax will be used to provide a further incentive to ensure that transitional work proceeds at the necessary pace. And I will also establish a programme board comprising senior leaders and waste management professionals across public and commercial sectors to oversee and drive forward measures to ensure full compliance with the ban by 2025. The board will report to me at regular intervals. And finally, we'll continue to prioritise reducing waste and increasing recycling to reduce reliance on energy from waste.
Maurice Golden.
On the 5th of September, in response to a written question on the subject, the SNP gave no indication the ban would not be met. When did the SNP government know they would fail to meet their own target on this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, with the greatest of respect to Maurice Golden, I think he needs to understand that the delivery responsibility for this actually lies with local authorities. And what we were doing over the summer was to try and establish what the actual picture was with local authorities. We have that information. I can advise that 16 local authorities do have fully compliant solutions in place for the period before 2021. 3 have secure post-ban solutions that will come on stream after 2021, but still lack an interim solution. 7 have a secure interim solution, but no long-term solution. And 6 have no policy compliance solutions in place and are not currently procuring a solution. That is the picture which we've had to consider and make a decision on. And when we saw that full picture, it was clear to us that that landfill ban in 2021 could not hold at the current level.
Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I find that answer extraordinary. I knew back in 2015, industry knew in 2015, local authorities knew in 2015. For the SNP government not to know reeks of incompetence or willful neglect. How can this Parliament trust the SNP to deliver on tackling climate change when they cannot make the most basic waste target?
I remind Maurice what I said at the start, that the delivery responsibility for this actually lies with local authorities. And I won't embarrass him by reading out the number of Conservative local authorities who are on the list for not having put in place solutions. So we are where we are at the moment. We've looked at options for the future. The proposal that I've come up with looks to me to be the most secure and certain, and is the one we will be working with over the next few years.
Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. Earlier this month, Clackmannanshire Council joined Stirling and Perth and Kinross in signing a 3-year waste management contract which will see their waste shipped to Sweden for incineration. Does the Scottish Government actually think this is an acceptable way to deal with our waste? And what support can they give councils who've signed such contracts, now only to find that the goalposts have been moved?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, with the greatest of respect, I repeat what I said at the outset. Delivery responsibility for the particular ban that we're talking about today lies with local authorities. And local authorities make decisions on the basis of understanding that, or unfortunately, in a number of cases, not making decisions on that basis. So I will, and I am happy to talk to any particular local authority about particular decisions that they have made. But what we have to be incredibly careful about now is to absolutely ensure that the 2025 extension is met, and that will be done not by incentivising the failure to succeed up until now, and we'll be looking at that very closely.
Willie Rennie.
There was never a coherent Scottish Government policy, so today's or last week's
decision was always inevitable. Sending waste on lorries to English landfills was never a responsible solution to meeting the ban. So how is the government going to use this delay wisely? And how will it encourage the market to seize the opportunities? Because the record of shipping waste abroad means our processing capacity is well below where it needs to be.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, there are some real issues that have to be thought through, as well as local authorities not having done the job that we were expecting them to do. There has been a difficulty in encouraging solutions, Scottish-based solutions out there. I agree with Willie Rennie. I don't think shipping waste Firth of Scotland is the ideal scenario at all, and it is what we are trying to prevent happening with the extension of this ban from 2021 to 2025. That is why we're looking very carefully at what might be put in place not to incentivise the further shipping abroad. And I can advise Willie Rennie that we are considering what we might do in respect of the landfill tax to ensure that we don't provide an inadvertent incentive to do so.
And Finlay Carson.
What support will the government provide local authorities to implement infrastructure which will reduce household biodegradable waste to zero?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, local authorities as a whole agree with the Scottish Government every year the sums of money that will go to local authorities. And that agreement takes place with a negotiation with COSLA. So I would expect, if this is to be a key part of the continued discussion, that they will wish to ensure that that particular issue is raised in the discussions with COSLA. But as the member knows perfectly well, because I've repeated it endless times this afternoon, the delivery responsibility for this lies with local authorities, and we do not intend to change that despite the extension to the deadline on the ban.
Question number 2, John Finney.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government for what reasons it has named Serco as its preferred bidder for the Northern Isles ferry services.
Minister Paul Wheelhouse.
Serco Limited were awarded the status of preferred bidder on a basis of an assessment ratio of 65% price and 35% quality as set out in the tender documents and made clear to all bidders when the invitation to tender was issued. Serco Limited were therefore assessed as providing the most economically advantageous tender under the terms of the competition, with a tender that was evaluated under the tender criteria to provide high-quality ferry services and value for money for the taxpayer. The statutory 10-day standstill period commenced on Friday, and during this period I'm constrained in what I can say regarding details of either bidder's submission.
John Finney.
I thank the Minister for that, for that report. Last year, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance signed a commitment to the application of fair work principles across Scottish Government and associated bodies. The RMT is in the process of taking strike action against Serco as the operator of the Caledonian Sleeper for reneging on pledges to address serious concerns on staff safety. Can the Minister honestly tell the Chamber that Serco is living up to those principles? And if not, perhaps he can explain why the Fair Work Convention was suitable for civil servants, but not for those working in the transport sector under Serco.
Minister.
We are required to act lawfully under the procurement rules, and there are no grounds for excluding Serco from the competition of the ferry services under those rules. Mr Finney references the Fair Work framework, and there's also, I just want to stress in terms of the issues he raises, there's no direct correlation between the contracts to which he refers and the contract for the Northern Isles ferry services, which have been operated successfully by Serco for the past 7.5 years. As I mentioned, Serco were assessed as providing the most economically advantageous tender under the terms of the competition, with a tender that provides high-quality ferry services, value for money for the taxpayer. And I want to reassure Mr Finney and indeed the trade unions, as I have already, that the Fair Work framework does apply in the tender, and Serco are signed up to that. So that means that there will be protection of pension arrangements for staff and no compulsory redundancies through the 8-year period of the contract. So I hope that Mr Finney takes some reassurance on that. The Fair Work framework does apply to this contract, and we will see that it is applied.
John Finney.
I thank the Minister for that reply. I'm very concerned at the Scottish Government's apparent indifference to the issue of reputational damage. CalMac was the trusted provider until 2012. Since then, Serco has been involved in a number of controversies across its staggering portfolio of government work. Last year, MSPs from all parties, including the Scottish National Party, condemned Serco's plans to carry out mass evictions of asylum seekers in Glasgow. Does the Minister believe that such a company is fit to carry out public services and deserving of public money in Scotland?
Minister.
I would repeat the point. I'm not dismissing the issues that Mr Finney raises around practice elsewhere, but what I would say is, as I've made a point in my second answer to him, that there is no legal basis for excluding Serco from the competition. They have won the competition on a fair and square basis. The team that have been awarded preferred bidder status have been running the service for 7.5 years without the issues that Mr Finney has raised coming to the fore. And more importantly, both the local authority, Orkney Islands Council, have already welcomed the decision. Ryan Thompson from Hightrans has welcomed the outcome, and stakeholders across the area are welcoming this decision. So I do appreciate the point Mr Finney makes, but that's completely separate from this particular contract, and the preferred bidder has delivered the service successfully for 7.5 years, and the decision has been welcomed by those using the service.
There's quite a lot of supplementary interest in this question. The first supplementary from Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much indeed, and I welcome the end to the uncertainty and with the continuity confirmation of Serco Northlink's selection as the preferred bidder for this lifeline service. It was strange, however, that when I raised it with the First Minister last Thursday, she felt unable to advise the Chamber of the announcement the following morning, even though journalists were then tipped off later that afternoon. In terms of the contract itself, does the Minister accept that it falls far short of meeting the growing and increasingly urgent demand for additional freight capacity highlighted by key businesses both in Orkney and in Shetland over the past year?
Minister.
I certainly welcome Liam MacArthur's positive remarks, and for the benefit of you, Presiding Officer, just to point out, journalists were not tipped off about the decision itself, but that one was coming, as is normal. But as the member has mentioned, that the issue was still being determined during the day in terms of whether it was appropriate to make a decision at that timing. But I do recognise his concerns about freight. A key factor in meeting the state aid rules is that services outlined in the public service contract are necessary and proportionate to communities' needs. Any additional services could have been interpreted as over-provision of aid and state support, thereby distorting the effective operation of the market. However, as Mr MacArthur may be aware, the contract has been designed with greater flexibility to allow timetable freight and ferry services to be amended to better reflect changes in demand across the year and from sector to sector. And we want to support the key areas of the economy of Orkney Islands and Shetland Islands, such as tourism, fishing, food and drink, aquaculture and farming, and to help Orkney and Shetland's economies to thrive. So these new arrangements will support that, and I will look to engage with those key industries and with Mr MacArthur and others as we go forward.
Maureen Watt to be followed by Jamie Green. Maureen Watt.
A 20% discount on cabin fares and a 3 years fares freeze for passengers, vehicles and cabins, building on a 30% discount for passengers and vehicle fares already enjoyed by islanders. Is it not the case that this SNP government has listened to and put islanders at the heart of this new contract?
Minister.
Well, thank Maureen Watt for her question. She is absolutely right that separately from the announcement of the preferred bidder status for Serco Limited, I was in a position to announce on Friday that islanders on the Aberdeen-Kirkwall-Lerwick services will benefit from the 1st of January 2020 from additional 20% reduction in cabin fares, and additionally passenger non-commercial vehicle and cabin fares will be frozen for 3 years. That's to add to the existing 30% discount for islanders on passenger and vehicle fares. Unfortunately, we cannot at this point in time introduce any fare reductions or freezes on the Scrabster-Stromness route just now due to the ongoing state aid complaint and the risk that further complaints will prolong the delay to the full rollout of RET on that route. However, the Scottish Government remains committed to the delivery of RET and will continue to explore options available. And clearly, we will continue also to listen, as I said, in response to Mr MacArthur and Mr Finney, to the island communities themselves and take measures to ensure that these communities, which play a vital role in the wider well-being of Scotland, are able to access the same opportunities for growth as the rest of the country.
Jamie Green to be followed by Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think what's important here is that regardless of who operates the service, islanders have an affordable and reliable service. I hope the Minister would agree with that. But the devil will very much be in the detail of this new contract. Can I check that he's sought assurances that whoever wins this contract will see action taken to improve cabin availability during peak times? And could he explain in more detail how this fare reduction freeze will be funded and implemented? It was unclear from his initial response.
Minister.
Well, I certainly recognise the point that Mr Green raises about the availability of cabin space. It's something we're looking at as part of the bid that Serco have made. One detail I can say is that they have committed to upgrading 10 cabin spaces to a premium standard now. that in theory reduces the number of standard fare cabins, but also the islanders now with the discount will be able to afford those at a price which is actually the same or lower than the original standard fare. So they're getting better quality provision, but we do have to address in the longer term. I certainly recognise the need for accommodation, particularly for families, at the point that's been raised by the islanders. But we're trying to address the affordability issue first, and hopefully in the longer term we can tackle the supply. In terms of funding, as he requested, that will become clear in the budget process, but we have internally had discussions with Mr Mackay, the Finance Secretary, and made sure resources there.
And Colin Smith.
Thank you, President Officer. Can the Minister confirm that under the new contract, all staff on the Northern Ireland's ferry service contract will be covered by the RMT's collective bargaining agreement, including any subcontracted staff on freight ships as well as passenger services?
Minister.
In terms of the detailed points that Colin Smith has raised, I'll write to Mr Smith with an answer about the specific issues of RMT's terms. But just to reiterate the point I made earlier, that the contract is adhering to the Fair Work framework, so there is protection for pension and terms and conditions, and for the no compulsory redundancies throughout the 8-year period of the contract as well, which are measures I hope will be welcomed by trade unions, but glad to sit down with trade unions and others such as Colin Smith to discuss these matters.
And question number 3, Sandra White.
Thank you very much, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it will offer its staff and customers of Thomas Cook in light of the company ceasing trading.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
President Officer, we are saddened by the collapse of Thomas Cook, which has a long history of providing many jobs across the UK and overseas, including around 640 in Scotland. We are working closely with the UK Government and the Civil Aviation Authority as the situation progresses. The CAA are leading the biggest peacetime repatriation operation with more than 150,000 travellers from Europe, North Africa, North America and the Caribbean over the next 2 weeks. We understand that there were 63 Thomas Cook shops in Scotland with an estimated 390 employees as well as around 250 staff based at Glasgow Airport. Additionally, there are Scottish businesses in the Thomas Cook supply chain that will be affected. This will be a very worrying time for employees and their families. We have already made the offer of support for affected employees in Scotland through PACE, our Partnership Action for Continuing Employment initiative.
Sandra White.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. As you say, there are a number of Thomas Cook shops, not just in Scotland, but in my constituency in Glasgow also, which I visited yesterday. In Gordon Street in my constituency, it was closed, there was no notice, and people were wondering about outside what was going to happen. I take on board what the Cabinet Secretary said about help, but they're looking just now for practical help. So can the Scottish Government or the Cabinet Secretary tell me what practical help we or yourselves can give to the people who just don't know if they'll even have any redundancy monies?
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, I recognise the concern which has been raised by Sandra White on behalf of her constituents. As I outlined in my initial answer, PACE is the primary approach that we use for providing offers of support to staff who are affected by incidents of this nature. We've also been in contact with one of the special managers that's been appointed, KPMG, and they will provide information to all affected staff on how they should make a claim to the insolvency service for any wages or other monies that may be owed to them. So it will be the insolvency service which will be responsible for pursuing that on behalf of former employees of Thomas Cook. Additionally, KPMG will also include a copy of our PACE Facing Redundancy Guide, which contains our PACE helpline number and website details, which will be forwarded on to all employees, former employees, that they have a record of, to provide them with that information to first hand.
Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary, and that seems helpful in regards to the employees and customers as well, I presume. But you did mention in your opening remarks that there are other agencies involved also. One of these other agencies, and a number of them, is Caledonia Travel, who I visited also yesterday. They actually supply the coach tours for visitors coming over. It's not just that, it's other the economy of not just Glasgow, Scotland as well. So these other agencies where people may lose their jobs and it may fall, are they able to get the same help as you've just recommended to staff of Thomas Cook, and where can we direct them to that help?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am aware of the concern about the impact it could have on some of the supply chain to Thomas Cook. As a member made reference to Caledonia Travel, Webhelp based in my own constituency in Larbert that provide a contact centre for Thomas Cook customers, again will be affected by Thomas Cook going into receivership. What I can assure the member of is that our agencies through Scottish Enterprise have set up a specific helpline to provide a point of contact for these companies within the supply chain who may be affected by the Thomas Cook situation. And they have a team of specialists that can provide specialist financial advice and wider support as well, including access to PACE arrangements if that's necessary and appropriate. But that specific that specific helpline has been put in place by Scottish Enterprise to support those companies who may be affected by this decision as a result of the impact it will have on the wider supply chain.
And Polly McNeill.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for his considerate response. The BBC reported that a woman from Glasgow who was booking a replacement flight to Rhodes, it reported that it rose from £280 to £1,000 the day after. Airline companies say that this is an algorithm and that could be the case, but would the Minister condemn airlines who might be seeking to take advantage of families who are in a tragic situation now trying to replace their plans for holidays and weddings?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, algorithm or not, it's appalling that any airline should be seeking to exploit individuals in these difficult circumstances. And I would ask all airlines to actually consider their actions in the coming weeks for those who have been adversely impacted by the demise of Thomas Cook. This is not an opportunity to make an extra couple of pounds out of people who are in a difficult situation. This is a time to help those individuals to restore their holidays and their plans and their hopes for going off on holiday rather than trying to just take more money from them. So I would call on all airlines to show support and some consideration to those who have been affected by the demise of Thomas Cook and to offer them support and help as opposed to trying to take further money off them.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions.